the relationship skills are passed down to us, and we learn them from inside the home and from our family dwelling and the generations and everything that's been passed down, good or bad, because unless mom and dad's passing down what they learned from where they got this information from, and the aunts and uncles and so forth and so on, good and bad. And so as we're growing up in the house, we're learning these things. What goes on in this house stays in this house, and ... and ... the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. We learn it all in the house. We learn how to navigate with our own siblings who we're different from. We're
very
all different. And it's like, how do we deal with being in the presence of a really smart sibling? And how do we deal with the presence of a lazy sibling? How do we deal with the presence of a spoiled sibling? How do we deal with the presence of a bossy sibling? So, because you're going to meet all these types of people in the world. We're going to have these people on the job. We're going to meet these people in school. We're going to have these kinds of people across the street as neighbors next door. Everything we encompass in the family, we're going to run into it out there. So it goes back to, how did you deal with your sister in this situation? How did you deal with your brother in this situation? How did you deal with your cousin in this situation? How did you deal with your nosy aunt? How did you deal with your uncle who had this situation, who had this problem? How did you deal with your aunt who had this problem? How did you deal with your grandfather who had this problem? How did you deal with your grandmother? Because all of this stuff.
So you're saying the family represents the world.
It represents the world. And so if avoidance was the way we dealt with all these situations, then that's what we'll do out there. The moment these things arise, we're going to avoid these people. We're going to avoid these situations. It's time to go now. Because I never learned how to have a relationship with these kinds of people when we disagreed. As long as the studious one did their studiness in their room out of my face, no problem. But when they want to bring their books out, when the family's over, we got a cookout, and here the studious A student got to sit out here with their encyclopedia and their notes and this, that, and the other.
Trying to
impress somebody. So you never really dealt with how this person does. This is what they do, whether they're in their room, whether they're with people, whether they're whichever. This is what they like to do.
So how do you get around?
How do you deal with overachievers? You realize you find we're overachievers when there's nobody around. But when there's a crowd around and the overachiever is getting all the attention, it's like, I don't deal with that so well, because I can't compete with this overachiever. And to me, they just showboating anyway, and this, that, and the other. But when you really think about it, weren't they this way when there wasn't a cookout? Weren't they always with a bunch of books? Weren't they always reading? Weren't they always thinking and observing? And so
what's the real issue?
Because if they were this way when the crowd wasn't there, all the family reunion wasn't going on. If they were that way when it was just y'all in the house, why is it now that they're seeking attention? So we have to learn.
I think that's a deeper issue with the person, the observer.
It's with the observer.